Welcome to the CRC webinar on Phase 2 Qualification and Registration. In the presentation, I'll give you an overview of the key information you need to know about Phase 2 qualification. I'll explain what to do if you've had changes between the qualification date and the date you're registering. I'll give you an overview of the information you need to know to be able to register correctly. And finally, I'll provide a run-through of the screens you'll see when you re-register for Phase 2. Please note, this presentation is just a summary of the information you need to know about Phase 2 qualification and registration. It is not a substitute for reading the full guidance, which is available on our website and entitled Assessing Qualification and Registering for Phase 2, details of which are shown on the slides in this presentation. Organisations which qualify for Phase 2 can register from the 4th of November 2013. Existing participants will see a button on their home screen on this day entitled Phase 2. They should click on this button to re-register. New participants will be able to see Phase 2 in a drop-down list of applicable phases for registration. Organisations who qualify for Phase 2 must register by the 31st of January 2014 to be compliant. Qualification is based on settled half-hourly metres only. Organisational groups should assess their total settled half-hourly metre supplies during 2012-13 and then exclude dynamic and passive supplies, supplies covered by climate change agreements, supplies covered by the EU emissions trading system, and any other excluded supplies as stated in section 4.3 of the Assessing Qualification and Registering for Phase 2 guidance. This is available on our website and a link to which is shown on this screen. If the qualifying settled half-hourly metre supplies equals 6,000 megawatt hours or more, then the organisational group will qualify for Phase 2. An organisational group is determined on the group structure as it existed on the 31st of March 2013. All UK qualifying supplies to those companies for the full year, that's 1st of April 2012 to the 31st of March 2013, will count towards the qualification assessment. If the organisations that were part of the group on the 31st of March 2013 used 6,000 megawatt hours or more in total, then that organisational group will qualify for Phase 2. If they qualify for Phase 2, they need to register between the 4th of November and the 31st of January. Please note that if you owned a company on the 31st of March 2013, you include its full 2012-13 qualifying supplies, regardless of whether you only purchased it mid-year. Having assessed whether the organisational group qualify for Phase 2, you then need to look at the subsidiaries within the group, and if any of the individual subsidiaries used 6,000 megawatt hours or more of qualifying electricity during 2012-13, these will be classified as participant equivalents. The concept of significant group undertakings in Phase 1 and participant equivalents in Phase 2 is different. If an organisation within a group structure and any of its subsidiaries together used over 6,000 megawatt hours, then the group was deemed to be a significant group undertaking in Phase 1. This meant that in cases where there was a long organisational structure, if the company or companies at the bottom of the chain used 6,000 megawatt hours or more, then all the holding companies above them were also significant group undertakings. In contrast, in Phase 2, only individual organisations which themselves use over 6,000 megawatt hours will qualify as participant equivalents. This means that participants are likely to have less participant equivalents in their Phase 2 CRC account than they had SGUs in their Phase 1 account. All participant equivalents need to be listed in the participant's registration. These will appear in a list underneath the participant's name. They are no reflection of a real-life organisational structure. Having assessed whether the organisational group qualify, any subsidiaries which you wish to allow to go off and have their own CRC account can do so. This is called disaggregation. The parent organisation must authorise subsidiaries to disaggregate, and to do this they must include them within their own registration first. We will explain how to do this later in the presentation. If the parent authorises a subsidiary to disaggregate, but the subsidiary never sets up their own separate registration, then that subsidiary will remain the responsibility of the parent organisation for all compliance activities. Organisations that were disaggregated in Phase 1 will need reauthorising to disaggregate in Phase 2. Again, we'll show you how to do this later in the presentation. Subsidiaries which you've chosen to disaggregate will need to set up their own participant account, and in this they need to include the CRC number of the parent organisation or the parent's company's house number. This allows a link to be formed between the parent's account and the subsidiary's account. Disaggregation isn't complete until both the parent has authorised the disaggregation and the subsidiary has registered and entered their parent's details. If your organisational group has had structure changes since the qualification date of the 31st of March 2013, this will not affect the fact that you qualify for Phase 2. In an instance where you have sold a participant equivalent between the qualification date of the 31st of March and the date that you are registering, that participant equivalent will need to set up their own registration if they are now a standalone organisation, or if they've joined an organisation which qualified for Phase 2, they can be included within their registration. If the purchasing organisation wishes to disaggregate the participant equivalent will be required to set up their own registration. There are various scenarios which could have occurred between qualification and registration. We've exemplified one of these scenarios on the following slides. For further information about changes to organisational structures between the qualification date and the date that you are registering, please see the guidance on our website entitled Assessing Qualification and Registering for Phase 2. Or alternatively, contact our help desk at crchelp@environment-agency.gov.uk. Here we have an organisation that's sold a subsidiary between the qualification date and the date that they are registering. At the top of the screen, we can see that Organisation A included subsidiaries B, C and D on the qualification date of the 31st of March 2013. The 2012-13 qualifying supplies to Organisation A equalled 12,800 megawatt-hours. Subsidiary B used over 6,000 megawatt-hours of qualifying supplies in 2012-13, so it qualifies as a participant equivalent. On the date that Organisation A comes to register, it has actually sold subsidiary B. It still qualifies for Phase 2 because on the qualification date of the 31st of March 2013, it used over 6,000 megawatt-hours of qualifying supplies. Participant A will not include any participant equivalents on its structure because it has sold subsidiary B. Participant A will put a qualifying supply of 5,800 megawatt-hours in their registration. This reflects the 2012-13 qualifying supplies to the companies that exist in the organisational structure on the day that they are registering. Here we have a purchasing organisation. They've purchased subsidiary B from Organisation A. Organisation W's structure on the 31st of March 2013 included subsidiaries Y and Z. The 2012-13 qualifying supplies to Organisation W equalled 13,200 megawatt-hours, so Organisation W qualifies for Phase 2. Subsidiary Y used 6,000 megawatt-hours or more of qualifying supplies during 2012-13, so it qualifies as a participant equivalent. When Organisation W comes to register, they will include 2 participant equivalents in their registration. This is because both subsidiary B and subsidiary Y used 6,000 megawatt-hours or more during 2012-13. Organisation W will put a qualifying supply of 20,200 megawatt hours because this reflects the 2012-13 qualifying supplies to the structure as it exists on the day that they are registering. The best way to think about Phase 2 is to see qualification and registration as two distinct tasks. First, the organisational group assesses whether they qualify based on their organisational structure on the 31st of March 2013, and if they do qualify, they are required to register, no matter what happens after that date. Now we will look at what the organisation needs to include in their registration on the day that they register. The organisation needs to include their 2012-13 qualifying supplies for all of the organisations that it owns on the day that it is registering. It also needs to include all the participant equivalents that it owns on that day, even if it is planning to disaggregate some of them. We'll now go through the screens that existing participants will see when they re-register. New participants will see very similar screens, but with the addition of a few extra screens up front. On a participant's home screen, they will see a new button on the 4th of November entitled Phase 2. They need to click on this to re-register. If you wish to have different contacts administering your Phase 2 account compared to your Phase 1 account, then you can do this. You need to click on the Manage Contacts button here, enter the new contact details, and then assign them a role. If you wish to keep the same contacts as you have for your Phase 1 account, you can just click Re-register on this screen. This screen then prompts you to notify us of any designated changes that have occurred to your Phase 1 account. If you've not notified us of these yet, please cancel your application, make a notification, and then come back to re-register. On this screen, it just reminds you of the contact details you have on your account. If these are correct, press Next. You're then required to specify whether you are a mandated participant or a participant. Most organisations will be participants. Government departments are mandated participants. These are organisations which are required to register despite the fact that they may not actually meet the qualification threshold. You're then required to tell us about any organisational changes that affect participant equivalents between the qualification date of the 31st of March 2013 and the date that you're registering. Provide a summary in the box and then click Next. You're then required to specify whether you have any settled half-hourly meters. For most organisations, the answer will be yes. However, there are instances when you may not have settled half-hourly meters, but you are still required to register. For instance, if you're a mandated participant, if you've had organisational changes between the qualification date and the date that you're registering and no longer own the settled half-hourly meters, or if you're disaggregating from your parent organisation. If you select Yes, you'll be taken to this screen. If you're an existing Phase 1 participant, the meters that you entered in your Phase 1 registration will have auto-populated on this screen. If you need to remove any meters, you can remove them individually or remove them all at once. You can then upload a brand new file with all your Phase 2 qualifying meters. You'll then be presented with a summary screen. You just need to tick the box to show that you've entered all of your Phase 2 qualifying meters. You'll then be required to enter your qualifying supplies. These are the 2012-13 qualifying supplies to the organisations that exist in your structure on the day that you're registering. So, from the examples we used earlier in the presentation, Organisation A would enter 5,800 megawatt hours in this box, and Organisation W would enter 20,200 megawatt hours in this box. There may also be instances where you are entering a figure less than 6,000 if, for instance, you are a mandated participant, you've had organisational changes between the qualification date and the date you're registering, or you are a disaggregating participant. In some cases, you may even be entering 0 if you don't have any qualifying settled half-hourly meter supplies at all. You also need to indicate on this slide whether you've excluded any settled half-hourly meter supplies from your qualification amount. For instance, if you have 10,000 megawatt hours of settled half-hourly meter supplies and 2,000 megawatt hours of these are covered by a climate change agreement, then you would tick the box, I have removed supplies for excluded uses from my qualification amount. you would then enter 8,000 megawatt hours in the box above. Full details of all of the excluded uses are contained in section 4.3 of the Assessing Qualification and Registering for Phase 2 guidance, the details of which are shown on the screen here. You will see a threshold warning screen if you enter a figure of less than 6,000 megawatt hours for your qualifying supplies. This is simply to make sure that you meant to enter a figure under 6,000 megawatt hours. As explained previously, this may be correct if you are a mandated participant that didn't meet the threshold, you are disaggregating from your parent organisation, or you've had organisational changes between the qualification date and the date that you are registering. You then need to indicate whether you have an overseas parent. If you're working for an organisation that has no UK-based entities and you are their proxy, you also need to select yes on this screen. You then need to enter the details of your ultimate overseas parent on this screen. We've now got to the point in the registration where you need to outline any participant equivalents which you own on the day that you're registering. To add a participant equivalent, click the plus button. You then need to enter all the details for the participant equivalent, including their qualifying supplies. They will then appear beneath the parent as follows. If you need to edit the details of the participant equivalent, click on the underlined name and the following options will appear. Once you've added all your participant equivalents, they will appear on this summary screen. Tick the box to declare that you've added them all and then proceed. You'll then be required to select your compliance account holder. This is the organisation that has the day-to-day responsibility for ensuring that the organisation complies with the CRC scheme. This organisation should be based in the UK, and if you are a UK-based organisation, it needs to be part of your organisational structure. It can be any size of subsidiary. Participant equivalents will be shown in the drop-down box, but if you wish one of your smaller subsidiaries to be your compliance account holder, click Other and then enter their details. If you are acting on behalf of an overseas organisation that doesn't have any UK-based entities, you also need to click Other and then enter your details and specify that you are a proxy organisation acting for the overseas parent. On this screen, you will then enter if you have a parent organisation from which you are disaggregating. So for organisations which were disaggregated in Phase 1, they will need to enter their CRC number of their parent on this screen. Participants who are newly disaggregating in Phase 2 will also see this screen, so they also need to enter their parent's CRC number on this screen to ensure that a link is formed between the two accounts. Alternatively, you can provide the company's house number of your parent to form this link. You will then see this screen where the details of the parent that you have entered are displayed. If these are correct, click Next. If the parent organisation has not yet authorised you to disaggregate, then you'll see the following screen. You can still proceed past this screen, but you need to make sure that you remind your parent organisation to authorise you to disaggregate. For a parent to authorise a participant equivalent to disaggregate, they need to tick the box on this screen next to the participant equivalent's name. Please note that a tick box will not appear against the compliance account holder's name for this account. If you want smaller subsidiaries, which we call non-participant equivalents, to disaggregate, you need to indicate this on this screen. To authorise a non-participant equivalent to disaggregate, you simply add them to this screen by clicking the plus button. When you have entered all the company details for the non-participant equivalent, they will appear on the list as follows. Once you've added the participant equivalents and non-participant equivalents which you wish to authorise to disaggregate, they will appear on this summary screen. Tick the box and then click Next to proceed. You're then nearing the end of your registration. On this screen, you can download a PDF summary of the information you've entered so far. If you want to go away and consult with others before submitting your registration, you can save at this point and your registration will stay on the system for 28 days. Once you're happy with the information that you've entered, click I agree and then proceed. You will then be taken to the payment screen for your registration. You can pay immediately by credit or debit card, or you can choose to pay by backs and chaps. The payment details for backs and chaps are displayed on the screen. The day after you've made your registration, we will also send you an email with the payment details on, so that you have them to hand. Please note that the bank account into which registration fees are paid is different to the bank account into which Phase 1 allowance payments are made. You've now completed the registration. However, to be deemed to be fully registered and compliant with the CRC scheme by the 31st of January 2014, you need to ensure that you've paid your registration fee and, if appropriate, gained approval from your parent organisation to disaggregate. Having paid and had authorisation to disaggregate, you will receive an email with your registration summary attached, and then the next time one of your contacts logs into your account, you will receive your Phase 2 registration certificate. That concludes the presentation on Phase 2 Qualification and Registration. Thank you for listening.